Hello, this is Harlan. Welcome to my tutorial on making wet felted cords. In this tutorial, I will be teaching you the basics of making wet felted cords and suggest that you start by making sample cords of various thicknesses, as I will demonstrate in the video. To make the sample cords, you will need a reed placemat for rolling the fibers. Now, in the video, you're going to see that my reed placemat has been covered with shelf liner on one side. You don't need to do that. That was an experiment I did on my part. You want a reed placemat that has very little space between the reeds. If there is too much space, there is a chance that the fibers will try to escape between the reeds. If you have a reed placemat with larger spaces, use a piece of plastic between the reed mat and the fiber. 4 colors of merino fiber top, which is sometimes called roving, and I call rope. You can see an example in this photo. The fibers have been stretched and combed to run parallel to one another. Merino is particularly good for wet felted cords because of its long staple and soft feel. Other fibers will also work, and if you intend to use them, you should make separate samples for future reference. Soap. I prefer to use olive oil soap as it is gentler on the hands and fiber. You can use a dish soap like Dawn. Hot water. It doesn't need to be boiling, but as hot as you can stand. A way to sprinkle that hot water onto the fibers. I use a ball bras sprinkler. You will also need white vinegar for when you wash your wet felted cords to remove all trace of soap and restore the fiber's natural pH level. Before we get started, a little more information about this fiber. Merino fiber sold in this form is not always of equal density or thickness. You may purchase one color and find that the top roving rope, however you call it, is thicker than it is in another color, even when it's from the same source. That just happens. Separate the fibers into a section that is about, the thickness of your thumb. That's a handy gauge to use because you're very likely to have it with you when needed. Finally, let's get to the first video. I start with a short review of the materials you will need. The more contrast you choose in the 4 colors of merino, the better. There you see the soap that I use. And hot water. And there's the mat with that shelf liner on it. You don't need to do that. Add a little soap to your hot water. You don't need a lot. But it'll be easier for the fibers to engage one another if there's a little bit of soap to lubricate them. Now I'm going to separate that piece of merino into a section that's about as thick as my thumb. You want to be consistent when you're pulling off fiber and laying it down. The key to this is to practice and to remember to not hold the fiber too tightly in your non-dominant hand. You want to provide some resistance, but it is not a tug of war. Notice that I am laying the fibers diagonally and overlapping across the reed mat. Once you have the fibers laid across the width of your reed mat, sprinkle it with soapy hot water. can see I'm adding hot water to my container, and now I'm picking it up in the ball sprinkler. You want to sprinkle water because if you spray it, you're going to disturb your fibers. Fold back the mat and begin rolling. It doesn't take long at all to form a basic cord, but the cord is not well felted at this point. It needs further agitation to strengthen the felt being formed. You can agitate the cord further by rolling it in the mat, or perhaps rolling it between your palms. Examine the cord and see if there are places that are still sort of loose, where the scales on the fibers haven't locked together fully. Maybe adding a little more soap would be useful. Experiment. These cords are not fragile, so don't be afraid to be a little rough with them. That helps the fibers felt tightly together, which is what you want. You might dunk the cord into the hot water again. Heating the fibers helps the scales open up and can help them to interlock. Keep manipulating the fibers until you have a well-formed, strong cord. Once you are satisfied with your cord, you're going to need to wash it very well to remove the soap, and dunk it for a while in some water with a little bit of vinegar to help restore the natural pH of the fiber. How long do you need to soak it in the water vinegar solution? I have not found a definitive answer. Some felters recommend 10 minutes, some less, some more. I'm in the less camp. Here's my theory. The fiber is naturally acidic, not excessively so. It's probably fairly close to neutral, but leaning towards acidic. Soap is alkaline. Soap really is useful when felting. It acts as a lubricant and helps the fibers move around. Some felters like to use just a little soap, and others like to use a lot of soap. Find what works for you. I don't believe we change the pH of the fiber simply by coating it with something alkaline like soap. So if we remove all traces of the soap by rinsing thoroughly and dunking it in water mixed with a small quantity of white vinegar and rinsing again, I think the fiber is returned to its normal pH and will live quite happily ever after. Now we're going to repeat the process, but this time we will lay out 2 layers of fiber. The second layer is laid in the opposite direction of the first. Now I suggested that you use different colors for your layers because when you examine your cords later, you can immediately identify how many layers of fiber were used to get that particular thickness by the number of colors present in the cord. The process is the same. Lay out the fibers, sprinkle with soapy water, roll in the reed mat, continue agitating the fibers until you have a well-formed cord, and then wash out all the soap with water and a little bit of vinegar. I sped the speed of this particular video up because it is a repeat of what we did previously, and it's really not that informative to watch it in real time. I've sped up this video. Now, repeating the process again, this time we're using 3 different colors and alternating the way each layer is laid out. I did not make a great choice for my third color, as it really doesn't provide as much contrast with the other colors as I would like. I was coordinating my colors, and for this project that isn't necessarily helpful. The more contrast between the colors you use, the easier it will be to identify how many layers of fiber you use to make what thickness of cord, and that is useful information. The process is the same. Lay out the fibers, keep them as even as possible, sprinkle with soapy water, roll in the reed mat, continue agitating the fibers until you have a well-formed, firmly felted cord. It's no different than the previous two examples that I showed you, just more layers, so it will result in a thicker cord. When you've finished felting your cord, you wash it in clear water. You soak it briefly in a solution of water and vinegar, and then rinse in clear water again. That's the whole process. No magic involved, and it's very easy. This time we have 4 layers of fiber. Each additional layer of fiber makes the resulting cord thicker. I'm not going to continue demonstrating additional layers and thicknesses of cords, but you certainly can make even thicker cords. Having samples that quickly tell you how many layers of fiber you will need to make them can save you time in future projects, and that's the point of making these samples. The process is always the same. Lay out the fibers, sprinkle with soapy hot water, roll in the reed mat, agitate until well felted, and then rinse well, removing all traces of soap. After this section, I'm going to demonstrate cords made with different fibers, how to make longer cords, and show you some of my work making use of cords. Purposely laying out very thin layers of fiber will result in a thinner cord. Merino fiber, having such a long staple, is a wonderful choice for making thin cords. You might want to experiment to see just how thin you could make a wet felted cord, although there is probably a point where thinner becomes less useful. This is a bat made of cut merino fiber. The long staple of the merino fiber has been purposely cut, and the fibers have been carded into a bat formation. This is called short fiber merino. It's a useful form of merino and makes a nice wet felted cord, but you can see how much shorter the fibers are. Here I'm using a fiber which is a combination of merino and corradale. This is a commercially available mix that I purchased from Living Felt. Corradale is a coarser fiber, but mixed with merino, the resulting cord still has a very nice feel to it. All the cords I have made have been rinsed very well, soaked briefly in a solution of water and white vinegar, and rinsed again. I'm laying the cords out here so you can see the variation in thicknesses. Wool has excellent shape memory, which means if you want a smooth, curved cord, you should smooth and curve it while it is wet, and then leave it to dry. Making a longer cord isn't difficult. Lay out your fibers. It doesn't matter if your fibers extend a bit beyond the reed mat. When you wet the fibers, wet them across the reed mat, leaving the very ends dry. Roll in the reed mat until a cord begins to form. Move the cord so a section of the end lies on the reed mat and then lay out more fibers. It probably is better to have the cord end lie on top of the newly laid fiber rather than under it. Sprinkle with water and roll with the reed mat. Continue agitating the whole length of cord, moving it in and out of the reed mat as necessary to form a well-felted cord. You can continue adding more and more length depending upon what you need. You can also join the ends. Now, this demonstration only used one layer of fiber, but you can use as many as you want for the desired thickness, and making a longer cord is achieved in the same way. Here are some examples of cords in my own work. I find them very useful. I use them mostly in jewelry. Some I purposely smooth, and with other cords I've used the crumpled look from rolling the cords in my hands. I hope you found this video tutorial interesting and informative, and will be able to make cords with confidence. Till next time, this is Harlan.